In 2026, America's next real estate disaster may not begin with banks, or stock markets, or rising unemployment. It may begin with something far more terrifying. Water. Right now, across the United States, millions of people are buying homes in places that are quietly running out of it. At first, nobody noticed. The lawns stayed green. Swimming pools sparkled under the desert sun. Developers kept building new neighborhoods. Luxury towers kept rising into the skyline. And investors continued believing the boom would last forever. But underneath the surface, reservoirs were shrinking. Groundwater levels were collapsing. And some of America's fastest-growing cities were becoming dangerously dependent on water systems that may not survive the next decade. Because the truth is, modern America built entire megacities in places nature never intended millions of people to live. And now, the bill may finally be coming due. Over the last few decades, population growth exploded across the American Southwest. Cities like Phoenix, Las Vegas, Austin, and parts of California became magnets for migration. People arrived searching for opportunity. Cheaper taxes, better weather, bigger homes, a new life. And for a while, it worked. Housing prices soared. Construction never stopped. Entire suburban empires appeared almost overnight. But beneath all that growth was one dangerous assumption: that water would always be there. And now, scientists, economists, and urban planners are beginning to warn that this assumption may have been catastrophically wrong. Because this isn't just a temporary drought anymore. Some experts now believe parts of the American West are entering a permanent era of water instability. A megadrought unlike anything seen in modern history. And if that happens, some of today's hottest housing markets could become tomorrow's biggest real estate disasters. The frightening part: most people still don't see it coming. Because real estate markets don't collapse the moment danger appears. They collapse when confidence disappears. And confidence can vanish incredibly fast, especially when survival itself becomes uncertain. Think about this. Would you spend $1 million on a home if you believed that city might face severe water shortages within the next decade? Would corporations continue relocating employees there? Would investors continue buying rental properties? Would insurance companies continue accepting the risk? Those are the questions quietly beginning to spread across America's housing market. And the answers could reshape the future of entire cities. For decades, the Colorado River acted as the lifeline of the American Southwest. This single river supports around 40 million people. It powers agriculture, feeds reservoirs, supports suburbs, and helped turn deserts into booming metropolitan giants. But today, that system is under enormous pressure. Lake Mead and Lake Powell, once symbols of engineering dominance, have experienced dangerously low water levels in recent years. Satellite images shocked the world. Massive white bathtub rings wrapped around shrinking reservoirs. Sunken structures emerged from beneath the water. And for the first time in decades, Americans began asking a terrifying question. What happens if the water runs out? That fear matters more than people realize. Because housing markets are emotional. People buy homes because they believe in the future. But once people begin questioning the future of a city itself, everything changes. Suddenly, buyers hesitate. Investors become cautious. Developers slow projects. And markets built on endless optimism become vulnerable. That's exactly why Phoenix, Arizona has become one of the most closely watched cities in America. Phoenix experienced explosive growth over the last decade. Thousands of people moved there every month. Entire neighborhoods expanded across the desert. Luxury developments stretched farther into arid land. And property values skyrocketed. But while the boom accelerated, so did concern over water. Arizona officials have already restricted certain new developments because of groundwater concerns. That moment sent shockwaves through the real estate industry, because it revealed something most investors never imagined. Growth itself may eventually hit a hard limit. Not because of money, not because of demand, but because of resources. And once that reality enters public perception, the psychology of the market begins changing. Now combine that with another growing problem: extreme heat. Phoenix regularly experiences temperatures above 110 degrees. Some neighborhoods remain dangerously hot even at night. Electricity demand surges. Water demand rises. Infrastructure strain intensifies. And scientists warn the region may continue getting hotter over time. Imagine trying to sell luxury desert homes in a future where heat warnings dominate the news every summer. Imagine rising insurance costs, utility spikes, water restrictions, political conflict over resources. Eventually, those pressures begin affecting migration itself. And when migration slows, highly inflated housing markets become extremely fragile. But Phoenix is not alone. Las Vegas faces a similar nightmare. A massive entertainment capital built in one of the driest regions in North America. Now, to be fair, Las Vegas has actually improved water efficiency dramatically. The city recycles large amounts of indoor water. Officials implemented conservation programs. And compared to many cities, Vegas uses water surprisingly efficiently. But efficiency cannot fully solve scarcity, because Las Vegas still depends heavily on Lake Mead. And Lake Mead became one of the most visible symbols of America's water crisis. Every image of that shrinking reservoir sends a psychological signal to the market. A warning, a reminder that modern infrastructure has limits. And markets hate uncertainty, especially luxury markets, because wealthy buyers can move anywhere. The moment confidence weakens, capital moves fast. And once luxury demand declines, entire high-end housing ecosystems can unravel with shocking speed, especially in cities dependent on constant population growth. Then there's Salt Lake City, a city facing a completely different kind of environmental danger. The Great Salt Lake has been shrinking rapidly, and scientists warn that exposed lake beds could release toxic dust into the air. Dust containing dangerous particles like arsenic. Now think about what that means for real estate. Air quality fears, health concerns, environmental lawsuits, declining quality of life. Suddenly, the conversation changes from affordability to habitability. And that's the word that should terrify investors the most. Habitability. Because once people begin questioning whether a place remains desirable long-term, housing demand can disappear far faster than expected. History proves this again and again. Cities thrive when people believe the future will improve. But when fear replaces optimism, migration reverses, capital leaves, and property values weaken from the inside out. Austin, Texas, is another city quietly facing growing pressure. For years, Austin looked unstoppable. Tech companies flooded in. Workers relocated from California. Housing prices exploded. And investors treated the city like the next Silicon Valley. But rapid growth created enormous infrastructure strain. Texas has always faced drought cycles, but climate volatility is intensifying those cycles dramatically. Longer heat waves, more severe dry periods, growing pressure on reservoirs. And all of this is happening while population growth continues accelerating. That combination is dangerous, because booming real estate markets assume tomorrow will resemble today. But what happens if tomorrow becomes radically different? What happens when water restrictions become common? When utility bills surge? When infrastructure costs explode? When migration patterns change? Speculative housing markets can reverse incredibly fast once narratives begin collapsing. And that's what most people misunderstand about real estate crashes. They are psychological before they become financial. First, people lose confidence. Then the numbers follow. And confidence across many Sun Belt cities may face serious tests over the next decade. But perhaps the most fascinating part of this entire crisis is that people continue moving into these vulnerable regions anyway. Why? Because short-term incentives still overpower long-term fears. Jobs, weather, taxes, lifestyle, opportunity. Human beings are incredibly good at ignoring future risks when current rewards feel attractive. That's why housing bubbles become so dangerous. They feed on optimism. And optimism always feels strongest right before reality changes. Boise, Idaho experienced one of the fastest population booms in America. For years, it seemed like the perfect escape. Affordable homes, beautiful scenery, lower crime, a quieter lifestyle. But rapid growth changed everything. More housing developments, more demand for water, more infrastructure pressure. And while Idaho still appears relatively water-rich compared to desert states, the speed of growth itself creates vulnerability. Every booming city eventually confronts the same question. Can infrastructure keep up? Or did expansion move faster than sustainability? Because when infrastructure fails to keep pace with growth, the long-term economic consequences become severe. Denver faces another unique challenge. The city depends heavily on mountain snowpack. For decades, the Rocky Mountains acted like a giant natural reservoir. Snow accumulated during winter, then slowly melted through warmer months. But climate patterns are changing. Snowpack is becoming less predictable, melting earlier, creating longer dry periods, and increasing competition for water resources. Meanwhile, Colorado remains one of America's most desirable states. Demand continues rising. Prices remain elevated. But when affordability collides with environmental uncertainty, markets become unstable. That instability matters because modern housing prices are built heavily on expectations of future growth, not present-day fundamentals alone. And if future growth weakens, valuations can change dramatically. Scottsdale represents perhaps the most surreal version of the American desert dream. Luxury resorts, golf courses, artificial lakes, mega mansions, extreme luxury built in one of the harshest climates imaginable. And for years, it worked beautifully. But luxury markets are highly sensitive to perception, especially environmental perception, because affluent buyers do not tolerate instability for long. If water fears intensify, if regulations tighten, if public backlash against resource consumption grows, luxury demand can weaken incredibly fast. And once luxury markets soften, entire local economies feel the pressure. Then comes California, a state with enormous wealth, but equally enormous vulnerability. California's water system is extraordinarily complex. Reservoirs, aqueducts, imported water, snowpack, groundwater, massive infrastructure networks supporting tens of millions of people. But climate pressure is increasing. Wildfires intensify. Heat waves worsen. Insurance markets destabilize. And costs continue rising across nearly every category. That may become the real long-term threat. Not one sudden collapse, but a slow economic squeeze. Higher utilities, higher insurance, higher taxes, higher maintenance costs, until eventually middle-class residents simply cannot afford to stay. And when middle-class populations begin leaving, housing markets weaken from within. Because sustainable housing markets require stable long-term communities, not endless speculation. But perhaps no city represents the future collision between climate risk and real estate speculation more dramatically than Miami. Miami's threat isn't just water shortages. It's rising water. Sea level rise is already affecting parts of South Florida. Flooding events are becoming more common. Saltwater intrusion threatens freshwater systems. And scientists continue warning about long-term risks facing coastal infrastructure. Yet despite all this, luxury construction continues at breathtaking speed. New towers rise constantly. Billion-dollar developments expand across vulnerable coastlines. And investors continue pouring money into waterfront property. It feels unstoppable. But history shows something fascinating about bubbles. The final stage often looks strongest. Maximum confidence, maximum speculation, maximum denial, right before reality arrives. Because markets can ignore warning signs for years, until suddenly they cannot. And when perception shifts, everything moves at once. Buyers disappear. Insurance companies retreat. Financing tightens. And panic spreads through markets that once seemed untouchable. Now none of this means these cities will disappear tomorrow. Far from it. Many remain economically powerful. Some may adapt successfully. Technology may improve efficiency. Infrastructure may evolve. But the risks are growing. And ignoring those risks could become incredibly expensive. Because water is different from most economic problems. You can delay debt. You can refinance losses. You can stimulate economies. But civilization itself depends on water. Without it, everything changes. And that's why the next era of American real estate may look radically different from the last. Future housing value may depend less on luxury and more on resilience, less on speculation, and more on sustainability. The cities that adapt intelligently may thrive. The cities that ignore reality may struggle. And the frightening truth is, most people won't realize the danger until after the market changes. After insurance costs surge. After migration slows. After confidence breaks. Because by the time a crisis becomes obvious, the smartest money has usually already left. So the real question isn't whether water will reshape America's housing market. It's how many cities are prepared for what comes next. Because the next great real estate crisis may not begin on Wall Street. It may begin with something far simpler: a faucet running dry.